the data on the Canadian economy is pretty bleak these days. Our unemployment rate is ticking up, the stock market is in a state of flux, and commodity prices are falling. But a new report this morning shows Canada's housing market is defying the odds and will continue to stay strong into the next year. Susan Prince is here with more on this. So what are the details of this report, Susan?
Well, the first report is from RE/MAX, and they're saying that it's a better year than they anticipated and their strength. But even more importantly, they think the trend will continue in 2012. What they're looking at is a more modest pace, but still the price of homes moving up. Where RE/MAX sees the greatest unit sales are in the cities of Calgary, Saskatoon, and Halifax, Dartmouth. And they're looking at about 5% growth in unit sales in those areas. Toronto, they're also seeing some growth, but at a more modest pace at about 3%. And that's matched by St. John's, Newfoundland as well. So we're seeing positive momentum going forward into 2012 on the heels of what has been a low interest rate environment. So people have been encouraged to purchase because they can pay their mortgages.
But you know what? We have to consider the source of this, right? RE/MAX. It's a company that wants you to buy houses. Of course, they're not going to say, hey, everything's tanking.
Yeah. Well, except that one of the nice things about these numbers is they do come from the Toronto Real Estate Board, and they're actual statistical numbers. So you can take a look and say, there are this many units, and you can track the trends. And that's a little bit more encouraging because you are looking at data, and then from the data, we can turn it into information about the outlook. But the trends certainly have been very positive.
Some positive news from StatsCan as well. What are those numbers?
Yes, and the numbers there are that building permits are up, and that is after 3 months of consecutive decreases. Now, bear in mind, the building permits are up in the non-residential areas. So we're looking at institutional buildings, and particularly in Ontario, we're seeing some strength there. Where we look at residential permits, they are down slightly. They're, let's call it flat on the month, and that's largely based on the fact that Alberta and Nova Scotia have less demand for building intentions for multifamily units and for single-family homes. So we're seeing the real growth come from institutional buildings.
All right. Why don't we have a look at the markets?
Why don't we? Because there's always different today. We're seeing across the board, you're seeing a mixed bag. TSX is showing some weakness. Bank of Montreal numbers came in a little bit lower than what analysts were hoping for. Dow Jones continuing to show some strength, and NASDAQ off a little bit as well. If we take a look at the commodities, we've got some interesting numbers there. Canadian dollar continues to be strong. West Texas, let's call it flat, even with the red arrow. We're not seeing a lot of movement there. But gold, we are seeing gold weaken there, largely because physical purchases of the commodity itself are slowing ahead of the European Union summit. So we'll continue to watch all of these markets for the remainder of the day.
Thank you, Susan.